Hello and welcome to another lecture for History of Journalism. It's unlikely that many of you have much knowledge of war, and so I'm going to do a short lecture on the theories of war and the actual mechanics of war, because many of the stories that we'll be talking about and looking at deal with war. One reason that war is so important in journalism is because it's literally life and death. And so let me give you some information about war. First of all, Karl von Clausewitz was a famous analyst of war, and his books are still used today in the military academies in the United States. He was born in 1780. He was originally Polish, but migrated to Prussia, and when he was young, at the age of 13, which happened a great deal back in those days, he went to war for the first time. And until 1815, he gathered practical evidence and experience by taking part in wars in which Prussia was involved during the era of Napoleon. On War is his classic text, which he started in 1830 and is, as I said, is still used today. And here are some of the main points. Wars are as good or as bad, as humane or as cruel as the nations who wage them. Humanitarian feelings influence war only insofar as they govern the policy of states, and that the elemental violence and brutality of war is its fundamental nature. The goal of war is an active force to compel our adversary to do our will. He had several principles of war. The first one was, war is an active force, and to the application of that force there is no limit. Each of the adversaries forces the hand of the other, and a reciprocal action results, which is, in theory, can have no limit. The second principle, if our opponent is to be forced by military action to do our will, we must either actually disarm him or put him in such a condition that he is threatened with the probability of our doing so. So if you apply this to the war against terrorism, for example, it is incumbent upon those countries who want to fight the self-proclaimed Islamic State to disarm the Islamic State. And that's not easy to do. The third principle of war. War depends on the extent of the means at disposal and the strength of will. What this basically means is that the military of the United States, for example, can only exercise its will as far as the American public wants it to. So, for example, the United States was limited by public opinion in placing troops in Syria because of our experience in Iraq. And so, therefore, there was not the political will to place boots on the ground in Syria as a result of the lack of and strength of will of the U.S. population. The outcome of war, the final decision for war, is not always to be regarded as an absolute one. The defeated state often sees war only as a transitory evil for which a remedy can yet be found in the political circumstances of a later day. There are important tactics of war. They are based on superiority in numbers, superiority in material, and superiority in strategy. So, for example, the United States applied massive force in Iraq and had superiority in numbers. It had superiority in materiel, but its strategy was flawed because it did not account for the strength of the guerrilla forces inside Iraq after the initial invasion. The application of war, there are various tactics here, attack versus retreat. There are some famed retreats that ultimately led to success in wars. Supply lines are very important, and what that means is you need to get food and munitions from one place to another. And what tends to happen in war is that the supply lines can become too long, and so therefore they can be disrupted, or they can be incapable of providing material. This was what happened to Napoleon with his invasion of Russia. It also happened with the Nazis and their invasion of Russia, is that the supply lines became too long and they could not be sustained, and so therefore ultimately that resulted in the defeat of both Napoleon and the Nazis in Russia. Navy becomes important in terms of movement of people from one place to another relatively quickly. Air and artillery provide cover for infantry. It's said that people and boots on the ground are the only way to win wars, but the infantry needs the support of air cover and artillery cover in order to advance on the enemy. Guerrilla warfare is generally used by smaller forces to strike quickly and retreat, to disrupt supply lines, to attack individual military operations, and this has been effective particularly in the past 50 years in places like Algeria, Middle East, and Southeast Asia, such as Vietnam. So that's what we have for today. I thank you very much, and we'll see you online.